To be sure, there is plenty of so-called carefulness going around today that is not scripturally sound. Absolutely, like Owen, this is mostly good stuff here. This is solid stuff, and he actually is totally in agreement with Doug, from at least what I read. Trying to be unbiased here, not just, attacking people because of their associations. I actually like this article from Owen. What I don't like is that he's attempting to disagree with somebody who I don't think he actually disagrees with. To be sure, there's plenty of so-called carefulness going around that's not scripturally sound. Not for nothing are the cowardly barred from the New Jerusalem. Quite a warning. Owen is just like heaping evidence on to Doug's argument here. But with this important caveat stated, we cannot miss that the Bible has a great deal to say about godly carefulness. Doug would agree. Doug is not saying that carefulness is useless. This is a straw man. He gives a lot of Bible verses here. Deuteronomy 12:32, you shall be careful to do. Joshua 22:5 says, only be careful to observe the commandment of the law. 1 Chronicles 22:13 says, then you will prosper if you are careful to observe the statutes. Now, there might be some equivocation on the word careful happening here. I think being careful to obey the laws does not mean like being careful in the midst of combat. In fact, 2 of the 3 of these verses, actually all of them, Deuteronomy, Joshua, and Chronicles, and I think I've noticed an interesting pattern. All of these so far, Deuteronomy, you shall be careful to do everything I have commanded you. Be careful to observe the commandment of the law. You'll prosper if you are careful to observe the statutes and the rules that God commanded. Be careful to obey my rules in Ezekiel 20:19. Wow. Ezekiel 36:27. I didn't notice this earlier. This is mind-blowing. This is pretty cool. Okay. Do you notice the pattern that's happening here? Notice what all of this be careful is about so far. Ezekiel 36:27 says, and I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes and be careful to obey my rules. Luke 11:35 says, therefore be careful lest the light in you be darkness. That kind of relates to the others. And he said to them, take care and be on your guard against all covetousness. So again, that's like take care so that you obey. Acts 20:28 says, be careful to pay attention to yourselves and all the flock in which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers. So like, pay careful attention to the flock. Okay, so that one kind of doesn't fit the pattern of the others. The point is, the pattern of like all of those that Owen just listed, it said be careful to obey. It's not saying be defined by your carefulness. It's not saying be a careful person. Like, think about this. What does careful mean? Careful means to take care of something, to have care about something. And so Doug, in his original article, this is a total equivocation. This is 100% a straw man. This totally agrees with what Doug is saying. I didn't even notice this when I was reading the quotes earlier, but look, how would you define careful in this situation? Desperate times call for faithful men and not for the careful men. The careful men come later and write the biographies of the faithful men, lauding them for their courage. Doug is not saying that people should not care about things. Doug is not saying that you're either courageous or you just don't care about stuff. Careful, in the way that Doug is using it in this here, is cowardly. It is like an opposite of courageous. If a person is afraid to do what they need to do, that's what he means by careful in the context of this passage. And it seems pretty obvious, in the sermon that he means this. The men who don't want to act and they just sit and they observe more than they're willing to go in and act, those are the careful people, not being defined as people who care about a certain thing. But if we look at the vast majority of these verses that Owen has shared, careful, as defined in these passages, means to express care for something. So when God says you will prosper if you are careful to observe, that word careful is a different definition than the word careful that Doug is using in the passage. Owen, like, this is crazy. This is so bad. It's like Owen just looked up the word careful in the Bible and then just like threw up a bunch of verses and said, look, see how important being careful is? Yeah, be careful to be obedient. This agrees with Doug Wilson. Careful people, like people who are afraid to act, those aren't obedient people. And so if you are careful to obey in the one definition of the word, you're not going to be careful in the other definition of the word, as in like afraid to act or fearful. Jeez Louise. Take care, brother. Okay, let's see. 1 Timothy. This just goes on. The vast majority of these verses, the word careful is used in exactly the same situation. Look carefully how you walk in Ephesians 5. Keep a close watch on yourself and on the teaching in 1 Timothy 4:16. Doug, by courageous, does not mean foolhardy. He means courageous. He means being willing to act. We need people who are willing to act at this time. And then the people who aren't willing to act, they can come up and write the biographies of the people who are willing to act.